I just saw this man sitting in the corner with his eyes closed. I just stopped in my tracks, and I didn't even really know why I was stopping, but something just kind of, especially when it comes to sexual energy, this is something also that he's very passionate about. And it's the same energy that is sexual, becomes creative, becomes meditative. And one important thing that I learned was when you're kind of asking that, you're not really asking for a mentor, you're asking for a savior. When you sort of realize that you are your own savior, then mentorship becomes possible. For some people, psychologically, that's easier to devote themselves to a human being, physical body. That kind of relationship works if you're actually willing to really surrender to that person. Beneath the psychology, beneath the personalities, the learned stuff, there's a real human being in there that just wants to be touched, that just wants to feel that connection. Living is about giving and receiving energy. And you see that in your breath. You inhale, you receive energy, you exhale, you give back energy. The nature of the relationship that you establish with somebody like Satya Ji, because in many ways it mirrors your relationship with life.
People tend to confuse sexual energy with sexual intercourse. I was doing more practices to avoid these emotions. I kind of not feel inclined to do my sadhana anymore, but somewhere I feel bad. Like, am I a failure? Did I waste Sadhguru's life? Will I go down the path and become a compulsive creature? He put all this energy into these practices and I'm not using it. What am I doing? So somewhere I questions my own intuition. There are a lot of people who don't even believe in that we have the capability to make our own decisions, to choose the right thing for ourselves, to choose the right practices for ourselves. But you're not a master, you're not a guru, so how can you know what's the right thing to do?
There's clearly a disparity that the guru is up here and they're down here.
How do we not waste our energy?
Once you can maintain total involvement in whatever you're doing now without having any sort of resistance or thought, without slowing your energy into any different direction, you're not scattered anymore, then you're just an integrated energy that keeps moving with life.
Today's episode is going to explore the journey of awakening, creativity, and the fusion of art and spirituality. I'm excited to sit down with Sahasrajit, head of the Satya Speaks community, a movement founded by Satya Ji, who has spent over 40 years blending the wisdom of consciousness, art, and creative energy. And in this episode, Sahasrajit will share his personal encounter with Satya Ji in the Himalayas, as well as lessons he learned working closely with a man of deep wisdom. We have the intention of exploring the traps of ambition in spirituality, what the world truly needs today, and the exciting intersection between mysticism and science. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
So I would love to start by just giving a little bit of an introduction of yourself to the audience. I did my best in terms of what I know of you, but if you give us a little bit of an idea of where you're staying right now, what it is that you are focusing on right now in your life, and the work around surrounding Satya Speaks.
Sure. So currently I'm in Italy with my family. This is where I grew up actually. So I was born in India, but I moved to Italy when I was quite young. And yeah, what I'm focusing on in my life right now is trying to balance work and awakening, I guess you could call it. It's funny, the more I kind of go on this path, the less I feel like I have the right words to talk about what's going on. But this balance it's not so much a balance between work and awakening, but it's more trying to remain conscious and centered in the present moment and not rush into thoughts or worries about the future and planning and productivity and all these kind of things. And realizing I have a very deep training around that of like this sort of very rajasic, hyper kind of goal-oriented approach to things, which I think we all have to some extent. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm working through at the moment. And of course, um, that is uh, that is also very much in line with what's going on with Satya Speaks, in the sense that that's the work that I'm doing and trying to be present with. But also, I feel that's one of the key things that we are trying to communicate to people and support people in establishing in their lives, which is the art of action, essentially. The ability to be present with the movement of whatever it is that you're doing and have that be your primary or sole intention, to be with that movement and to let that movement move you rather than to have some idea or some goal or fixed preferences over what needs to happen and try to impose that onto life, which is basically what we always do when we're operating from the ego. So it's a kind of nice circular process where the things that I'm learning through Satya Speaks, the courses that we're doing, and from Satya Ji directly, applying them into my life and into my work as well with Satya Speaks.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds, it resonates a lot with what I'm experiencing right now as well. So I think that's where this conversation is kind of initiated in. I do want to start with the encounter with Satya Ji in the Himalayas,
Mhm.
also to give people a context of how you came across him in your life. The video that I think you have recorded with Satya, How to Taste the Juice of Life, has now crossed over 500,000 views. So I would like for you to take us back to your first encounter with Satya.
Sure. I think to tell the story properly, I need to rewind a little bit before that for the context, which is it's around 2 years ago, a bit over 2 years ago. I was in London and I was working as a freelance consultant, and I had for a long time felt very drawn towards spirituality and exploring my consciousness, and I really wanted to establish a sort of sense of peace within me. And yeah, circumstances aligned themselves in a way where it was the right time to really go and do that fully. So I left everything and I went to India in the summer of 2022. That's 2 years ago, right? Yeah, maybe it was 2021. Anyway, doesn't matter. But yeah, I went to India and I just felt very drawn towards the Isha Yoga Center and Sadhguru's ashram, where I spent 2 months. So before that, I had started doing some of the practices. But while I was there, I did a lot of them, probably too many of them all in one go. So I got to the point where I was suddenly, like in the beginning of that year, there was no sadhana really in my life. I would like read books or watch lectures or something. But then suddenly by like September of that year, I was doing like 5 hours of sadhana a day. It was just very crazy. Um, but yeah, that was a very beautiful time, a very beautiful experience in that space. As I know you've also spent a lot of time there, and that kind of it taught me, I think, two important things, which is that joy and comfort are not the same thing. Because I was probably the least comfortable I've been in my whole life. Yeah, waking up early, working a lot during the day, and
Yeah.
um, all that kind of stuff. But I felt this sort of lightness or exuberance that coexisted with that discomfort. You know, it wasn't that that discomfort needed to disappear before I felt that. So that was a kind of
Mm.
subtle shift for me. And also when I went to India, I had this sort of like earlier that year, as it often is before you really start to take action in your life, you get into a very dark place. And that's what kind of pushes you to take that action. And I remember even writing in like a journal or something, and I would never really communicate with any sort of like divine thing or any other entity. I didn't like really believe in that stuff. But I remember writing, I said, please, like, I really need somebody to guide me. Like, I need some kind of guidance or mentorship or something because I'm so lost. And after that point, I actually remember because it was so intense and so sincere in that point where I just realized like I cannot actually help myself. And then things started coming, like I started feeling like I should do inner engineering or I should do the yogasanas. And I started doing those things, which I had been loosely aware of because I had, listened to Sadhguru for many years. But as soon as I started taking action, then things started just flowing. And I found myself going to places and having experiences that I could have never orchestrated myself. And so when I was in the ashram as well, I wanted to stay longer than 2 months originally, and I wanted to do the Samyama program. But something felt like not super right about it. I didn't feel like I was going for the right reasons, which was kind of basically fear of missing out. Like, everybody's like really hyping it up and saying it's very important, and Sadhguru's doing it for the first time after COVID, and you kind of feel you don't want to miss that boat, but it wasn't the right thing for me. And I had I had a sort of weird inkling that there was somebody that maybe I needed to meet in the north of India. But by this time, having been in the ashram for 2 months, I really saw that and I'd met brahmacharis and various different kinds of, conscious beings. And I kind of realized that I don't really need the kind of mentor that I was really desperately wanting earlier in that year. Because with the sort of tools that are available and the systems that have been very generously made available, if I apply them in myself, that's really what's making the change. And there's so much I need to do in myself that, and I know that now, and I have the tools for that now. I don't really need that kind of, because I guess a lot of people, I think, and I see this in requests with Satya Ji now as well, they really want to meet him or they really want to spend time with him. And there's a sort of urgency and a desperation in their reaching out. And I can kind of see myself of like 2.5 years ago in that. But I think one important thing that I learned was when you're kind of asking that, you're not really asking for a mentor, you're asking for a savior. And I think when you realize that you are your own savior, then mentorship becomes possible because you don't really need it anymore. Then it becomes a sort of supportive thing that, of course, nourishes you in a way that you need. I'm not trying to undermine that thing, but I'm just saying it's not necessary to get started. And if you don't have a mentor right now, it is a very true thing. I think what they say that when the disciple is ready, the guru appears. Anyway, it's a long-winded. I'm not good at short stories. So I left the ashram and I went to the north, and I was traveling with a friend that we went to Rishikesh, and yeah, I mean that's a very beautiful and very charged place. I don't know if you've been,
No, not
but
yet.
yeah, not yet. Uh, so through some kind of turn of events, we were in a hostel for a few days, and then we bumped into somebody randomly who suggested a hotel, and we went there. We decided to stay there, and in the cafe of that hotel, on the day that we checked in, we were going out to head to some waterfall, and I just saw this man sitting in the corner. So sitting with his eyes closed, and a turban and jeans and a kurta. I was just a bit. I just stopped in my tracks and I just kind of looked at him for a while. I didn't even really know why I was stopping, but something stopped me. And my friend was like, "Okay, come on, let's go." I said, "Okay, fine." And we went to the waterfall. Everything came back maybe an hour or so later, a bit more. And he was still there in the cafe. and he was talking to some people or something like that, and we went to sit down. I said, okay, now I'm gonna talk to him, definitely. So I kind of sat down next to him, and I had two ice creams in my hands because I was really hungry after our trip and I wanted an ice cream. And so I bought two and I was eating one, and I finished this one, and I was just trying to think of what do I say, or trying to when is the right moment to kind of say hello, because he was a bit in his own zone. And then I realized I'm like really full. So I just go over to him and I said, "Excuse me, do you want this ice cream?" And he looks at me like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I really, I'm too full. I don't want it." He was like, "Ah, good. Yes," because I was looking at the ice cream. I was thinking it looks tasty. Yeah. So that was my first interaction with Satya Ji, and yeah, from there we just started speaking, and he has he's just a very genuine person, and I think he doesn't really put on any sort of mask, or he doesn't hold himself in any different way depending on who he's talking to. Or and what I really mean by that is, like, you speak to him and he's communicating this wisdom that is not just in the rich knowledge and content that he shares, but it's also in the sound of his voice and the vibration. You can see it's from his firsthand experience, and it carries this very raw passion for life. And the beautiful thing that I loved about him was the paradox of it, because he would speak all these, super profound things about the nature of life and thought and everything. And I'd just be there like, wow. And then he would just like crack a joke about something, or like, make fun of himself, or it was like speaking to a friend. And he would be there with his chai, and it was, it suddenly kind of, I think just how unassuming and sort of open it was. And there was no sort of show around it. There was no like ashram, there was no crowd, there was no nothing, no sense of levels. That I I really very quickly had a very deep love and respect for him and what he had to share. And so I really strongly felt that in the couple of weeks that followed, I was spending a lot of my time with him. And I even organized a trip that we could go deeper into the mountains. And that's where we recorded that video. And honestly, it was like super spontaneous. We were just sitting, he'd just be talking the same things. And I just said, you know what, let me record this because this is pretty cool. So I was just sat there, and you can see the camera's kind of shaky and whatever. And, but um, I didn't even think at that time, where am I going to put this up or anything. And in those 2 weeks, it was so magical, and like my mind got blown so many times. And even, like maybe at like a consecration or with Sadhguru, or during an initiation or some very high energy event, you get these sort of really expansive sort of moments happening. I was experiencing that just in conversation with this guy. So I really felt like something, it was like a lot of clear nudges from life that, like, this is, you should really do something about this. And so then a few months later, we kept talking about what to do and workshops and things like that. We had done one or two to try them out, and eventually I had gotten even sort of distracted or occupied by some other projects that I was doing with friends, and this sort of thing of Satya Speaks even sort of became temporarily something that, like, I wanted to spend time on, but I kept saying, okay, a bit later, a bit later, a bit later. And then I think life intervened, kind of knocked me on the head. And a friend of mine just told me, I remember once, just, hey, just don't think about how you're going to handle all of this and balance all of that and do all of these things. Because that was the main block. I was like, I already have so many things happening. How am I going to do also this? Just do the simplest possible thing that you can do, and just do that. What is it? I said, well, the simplest thing I can do is just make a WhatsApp group, because he's an older man and he's not so savvy with technology, but he knows how to like text and use WhatsApp. So I'm like, okay, we can do that. So make a WhatsApp group so he can start to share this wisdom. And I did that. And then I added my friends. He added some of his friends. I thought, okay, maybe we can get together like 50 people or something through all of our kind of connections and start. But then I thought, I don't know. I was just like, what if, I'm sending these invites to people, but I would like to show them a bit of who he is. So I would look through my phone and I saw those videos that I had recorded. I had forgotten about them completely. And I cut them down to like that 5 minute thing. And then I put it on YouTube, literally with the intention that I would copy that link and send it to my friends. And what I had done was I had also put the invite link to join the WhatsApp group in the description of the video. I said, why not? Maybe somebody else will see it. They'll find it interesting. Great. And yeah, within 2 weeks, there were more than 1,000 people in the WhatsApp group. It's like so many people had joined in. In that same time, I'd got like 200,000 views or something. And this influx of people suddenly happened. And it was a big surprise to both of us. And from there, we just kind of improvising basically from that. So that's how it started.
Wow. I mean, when you were describing this moment of meeting him, I could really, it was like almost tears falling. Just there's so much simplicity in it, but so much profoundness in that simplicity. And yeah, I think I was gonna ask you, like, what was it that struck you most during that first meeting? But I think the answer was already there. It's like the simplicity that he is just a friend, but the way that he communicates, the way that he speaks, the way that his words resonate with you was like something much larger than you could imagine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were sharing about how Satya Speaks kind of, started to emerge. And I do want to go into what you were saying, that he is not a friend, he's not a guru, he's not a teacher, he is a friend. Because I think that's quite an important thing. You mentioned that
Mm,
we, like you yourself and me, we were at a certain point in our lives where we felt like, okay, I don't know how to solve this. I don't know how to get where I want. Maybe I don't even know where I want to go. And in those moments, we always look for guidance outside instead of looking within. And so, yeah, I would just like to hear this, like, Satya Ji as a human, not a guru, because many people, I'm sure you encounter, that look at him as a guru or somebody that they really have to see. Yet he also emphasizes the idea of being seen as an equal. So how does the perspective shape
mm,
how does the relationship with him, um, how did you see that with his students, with the community? How do you, why do you feel that that is important?
mm. I think it's very important the nature of the relationship that you establish with somebody like Satyaji, because in many ways it mirrors your relationship with life. And as you start to see everything, as he says, that no matter what you're doing, you're only always interacting with this one life, this one being that is playing all the characters in your life, all the people around you. So really, you just have one relationship between what you perceive to be you and what you perceive to be the other. And then on a different zone also, even that disappears because there's all just one, right? But essentially, for for us, where we are starting and embarking on this dance, that kind of relationship this dialogue between yourself and life is a very powerful and I think very real framework also for growth. And this is how Satya Ji frames devotion and bhakti. The way that he talks about it, I I never realized beforehand that like devotion was really something very important to me. Like I always knew I was a very sensitive person and a lot of emotions and all that kind of stuff, but I never heard anybody speak about it in such a way that felt natural and relatable, um, because it has a lot of decorations around it of like, touching a guru's feet or, worshiping a particular god or idol. And, I think that was probably also my own misunderstanding, but I don't think it's an uncommon misunderstanding. And I think the reason he's so insistent about the way you see him and to not look at him as a guru. In the end, if you want to look at him like that, it's like you're free to make up whatever relationship you want in your mind. But in the end, it's what serves you really as somebody who wants to establish a deeper connection with life. Because in the past, when one saw a guru or saw somebody who was very conscious or enlightened, you can say, and they felt that energy and they said, I'm going to devote my life to you and be your disciple because you know more than me. So I give you certain responsibilities over me. Like I will submit to you and devote myself to you. And so then the guru becomes a sort of container for the grace of life to act into that person's life, right? And for some people, psychologically, that's easier to devote themselves to a human being, physical body they can see, a form that they can see, whether that's the form of a guru like Sadhguru or any other, or Osho or whatever, or it's in the form of some deity like Krishna, Durga, whatever it is. So that relationship, though, it works if you're actually willing to really surrender to that person and allow their will to dictate your life, your actions, and everything. And to me personally, if I'm being honest, that never appealed to me. I was always like, that doesn't sound good. Like, I don't want to do that. Why should I submit to another human being like this? And there was always that thing. And I think in the modern world, because we have all seen so many things, exposed to so many different kinds of mentalities from around the world, that kind of simple, pure, devotional psychology is very rare to find. So that kind of disciple doesn't really exist anymore. As such, that kind of guru doesn't really work anymore. So life is also adapting its way of disseminating wisdom. It's not attached to the form of guru disciple. It's just that's what was necessary because that's what the psychology could handle at that time. But I think nowadays there's more beings, more people that have a more mature psychology, or also just a better, we have more material abundance. And I think that's made a big difference. The kind of level of material security that a lot of people have today that just was not available before, that allows you to kind of have a more confident footing to be like, okay, I want to kind of see it on my terms and engage with life on my terms. And for that kind of engaging on my own terms, I feel this sort of supporting figure of somebody like Satyaji is really beautiful and very challenging to engage with, because it's hard to not put somebody above you or below you. Like that's so deeply our conditioning of ego. And to be really a friend, you have to maintain that equalness, which is really a challenge. And I think the challenge of doing that with somebody who's also very kind of wise and directive will say also very brutally honest things that hurt you inside, you know. Um, that kind of I think it's just a very beautiful practice almost to keep that sort of level thing with everything in life. And essentially I think that's even one way of saying that's the whole path. Like I think I remember there's a story. So one of Buddha's disciples asked him, um, Buddha, somebody told me that you said that, friendship is half the path. And like Buddha stopped for a moment and he thought and he said, no, it's the whole path. You know? And I think really I guess the significance of that, if we're able to see everything as just that one undifferentiated energy, and to value everything as a reflection of that life and approach it with love, that love becomes possible. One other thing I really love about Satya Ji's approach is when he talks about love, you hear a lot about like, oh, you should be loving and kind and forgiving, and that's great, sounds great, but like, how do I do that? Because I'm bitter and I'm upset, like. So what he says is that love is it's a natural consequence of a unified energy that doesn't have contradiction. So what I mean by that is we're split inside always. We are, as personalities, we're taught in many ways to go against ourselves, to criticize ourselves, to judge ourselves. And especially when it comes to sexual energy, this is something also that he's very passionate about, which is, even within the spiritual space, there's a lot of people who have a subtle or not so subtle rejection of sexuality and sexual energy, but it's all the same energy that animates your life, and is the same energy that is sexual, becomes creative, becomes meditative. And fundamentally, that's the root where we go against our roots. We try to tame ourselves to be socially conformant, and this is a story that's been going on for hundreds of years. But in that, the work is to undo those patterns and to let go of those judgments. And as that happens, way I picture it at least is you're kind of a crooked sort of form that is, the energy is going against itself and it's short circuiting. And that's where we get all our neurosis and anxieties and depressions and everything. But as you sort of come into alignment, that energy is allowed to flow undivided, unscattered. It's not going against itself. Then you become a whole, or what they say, individual. Individual comes from the roots not divided, right? And so when there's that, when you experience that non-dividedness within yourself and with others, then there's no question of love or not, because that is itself love, that undivided energy. And that kind of, yeah. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent.
It's really beautiful. I can reflect upon myself in many ways, looking at many times in life what you have spoken about, how important it is to have a friend that just keeps you, pushes you in moments when you're not really ready, but that's something that you want to do, but somewhere there are those fears and doubts, and then there's that friend who just gives you a little bit of a push. He doesn't need you kick you. He doesn't need to do something for maybe he does sometimes need to do it forcefully, but I can see that how important that can be. And I do see what you were saying about how human consciousness is changing. Um, if I'm not wrong, even Sadhguru said that the age of the guru is is coming down. It's changing, and the form that a guru is functioning in the world is changing as well. And I feel that people need to, at a certain point, come to the acceptance of that, because there is a resistance as well, because we are being taught that we need somebody who will guide us. And I think that's what that misunderstanding that you were talking about before is, that we need someone else to tell us where to go, what to do, what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what to eat, what not to eat. Like, we always look for someone else to tell us and to guide us, instead of looking at within ourselves and see what is working for us. And so I can really relate with what you were sharing.
The whole purpose of sadhana or of initiation is that you develop, particularly with initiation, such a bond with your guru that the inner guru awakens within. And that guru is the one you hold a conversation with. That guru is the one who will answer the questions for you.
Things are are shifting, and I think there's more potential now to have real individuals on the planet. And it's a very tough and arduous um, process to become that and to undo that sort of conditioning. But I think the level, just the peace and the bliss that comes from that, and the clarity and the feeling of just belonging, essentially, I think is really what we crave all the time, if in one form or the other. And I also I hope to see, and I wonder, is my proposal to life with this Satya Speaks, that it can become a sort of a movement or a space of inspiration. Of course, from Satya Ji to the rest of the community, which already it is. But I'm also open to seeing the right ways of structuring it where people can also support and inspire each other, the people within the community. And there are some challenges to that, which you can go into later. I don't want to digress right now, but the that thing of inspiration that you mentioned, of like we need a friend sometimes, I think that is really very true. That, because we are so contorted against ourselves with our own minds, we doubt even the best things. You will doubt them. And especially when you come from a very doubting mentality, you take doubt very seriously. Like, oh, if I'm doubting this, if I'm afraid about this, it means it's not the right thing. And then you end up being discouraged. And in those moments, having that kind of that fire of a friend to inspire you to do what you need to do, not what they necessarily think is right for you. But in that way, Satyaji has been a really incredible friend to many, many people, not on a personal level, like no personal interaction, but just that sharing of that fire. He always uses this analogy, which I think is very beautiful, that, to awaken is in a sense to burn, to be alive is to burn. And we put off our fires because we're taught that fire is dangerous and fire is hot and it's bad, so we shouldn't. That's our sexuality, vitality, our anger, whatever it is. But if that's not allowed to burn, then there's no warmth and there's no light and heat to share. And contemplating on this analogy where that light and the heat is the wisdom and the love, he says, the fire is like in the belly, the body, the Durga, and then the heat in the heart is the love, the Shakti, and the Lakshmi, sorry, and the light is the illumination, the wisdom, the clarity. But all these things require that fire to burn at the base, where we are so cut off, or we are very judgmental of ourselves, or we're taught that that's not okay. Those more wild aspects of us, and I think that's also the seeing myself as a fire has really shifted even my relationships with people and how I look at relationships at all. Because before, when I was, and I still am, I'm not that I'm so attached to the psychology of things, but I can see when I'm in that psychological space, there's so many sort of there's it just feels much more like a gripping thing, that relationship, that, like, there's certain obligations I have to fulfill, otherwise the other person will be upset. I have to do this and that, and there's a sort of exchange where it feels like we're kind of taking from each other. And but with this thing of a fire, I've noticed this happening is sometimes even those same people, those same relationships, the level of affection or warmth or kindness that they show to me, on an ego level, it doesn't make sense because maybe I've not been speaking to them for a while, or I've not been indulging their stories. I've not been listening to their issues. I've not been doing the stuff that normally friends should do. But but the warmth is there, the fire is there, and it's impersonal. It's just a warmth, and it's so fascinating to see how even relationships where you might really struggle. So like, in this path I've taken, very unconventional and insecure sort of lifestyle compared to what I was doing before. So my parents had a lot of resistance to that, especially in the beginning. That was a very difficult relationship to navigate because basically most of the expectations or the kind of psychological challenges I face within myself are from them, and they're like externalized version of that sort of. So it really is very deep, that those roots. Everybody wants to make their parents happy, and you know, it's but it's been very interesting to see that if I focus on my sadhana and more, the real sadhana is to relate with life as life and not as a form, not to take the form to be the real thing, but always remember, like, I'm speaking to this laptop, I'm speaking to the divine, to the Shakti. Like, somebody's angry with me, I engage in that conversation. That is like, it's still engaging with Shakti. And you kind of perceive on that level, there's like a different circuit going on. It's not just this social, mental pros and cons and sort of social appearances, calculations, and judgments level. Like, beneath that, there's a real energy level. And that's where, Satya Ji says, that's where the real human is. Beneath the psychology, beneath the personalities, the learned stuff, there's a real human being in there that just wants to be touched, that just wants to feel that connection. And I feel that having that kind of connection and knowing how to touch people, I feel that's real friendship. It's not always like you have to be there all the time, or you have to, like, do certain things for the other person. This is I don't know, maybe like a spiritual friendship. I don't know what to call it, but yeah.
There are two things that I want to talk about, but which one is the sexual energy that you talked about. And I think I want to go a little bit more into that topic because people tend to confuse sexual energy with sexual intercourse. And I would like to go a little bit more into that topic when you talk about that fire, that sexual fire that has been ignored or repressed and distinguished in that sense. What exactly, can you elaborate on that?
Mm. I think my number one suggestion for anybody curious about this is to go onto the Satya Speaks channel and see some of Satya Ji's videos on it. He has certainly explained it better than me. But essentially, it's this, that we, when like you rightly say, when people think about sexuality or sexual energy, it's about the physical intercourse, and there's these feelings of intense desire and lust, and for a lot of people, there's also a lot of perversion around it, which is why they kind of see it as a sort of dirty subject, that this is not okay, or it's not good to talk about. But it's ironic because it's actually that attitude of avoidance that has created the perversion in the first place, and these sort of ugly perversions that you see in pornography, for example, where you have a lot of glorification of the ego or harm of the other. There's a lot of violence that's kind of coming through that on. But in essence, before it is rejected, that pure energy, what it feels like, it is essentially your life force. It is who you are. It is your power to stand as an individual, separate from the society. Separate, I don't mean without any interaction. I mean that you don't depend on them to feel that you exist. This is the real independence, that, because that's what most people go into any social interaction, so that they feel that they can exist. But the sexual energy that you feel, when you feel this unblocked within yourself, for example, if you do the shaking and dancing meditation that's on our website, that is a very powerful way to awaken this energy within you. You don't even have to call it sexual energy. It's better you don't call it anything. Just feel it, this current, this vibration that comes alive in your body. This fills you with vitality. Everything becomes bright. You feel so alive and you feel powerful. That power, this is the vitality and the sexual energy that we're talking about. Because that can then become many things. And it's not that it's yours to manipulate. This is the key. People think power, they think control, they think dominance in a particular way. But the only way to really make a friendship with this energy, which is far more powerful than you, it can cook you alive, this energy, this, Kundalini or whatever. It has to be approached with utmost reverence, that this body is not your territory, is not your energy to manipulate in the way that you want. And when I say not yours, I mean not your minds, not your egos. Because when this thing really becomes alive and really starts to move through you, you see that your ego does not have the control that it had anymore. Like, you will respond to a situation not based on what you think you should do, but based on the energy, how it moves you. It starts to just move you. And it's like, if you've ever danced spontaneously or done anything like that, you know that kind of feeling where you just follow the movement. But your whole life starts to become like that. So that energy, when you're doing something creative, it pours into that. When you're meditating, it really expands into that. And yes, of course, in human life, if you're having physical intercourse, it also goes into that direction. And there's nothing wrong with that, But I think we are so obsessed with physical intercourse as a society, because in the past it was so heavily repressed. And I think why it was heavily repressed, I think, there's different reasons floating around. On the sort of more, let's say, I think one reason is that people started to like separate out societies, and they didn't want this rampant intermixing between social groups or various things. I think that's a kind of surface level lie reason. I think a deeper reason, which is what Satya Ji says in many of our videos, is that when you cut this off, this power from your base, you're lost. Like, you don't know what's going on anymore, because a human being is designed to have this energy flowing through them. It's like, imagine a laptop that doesn't have any electricity in it. It's just like a block, and this is our electricity. So they cut it off. Societies, large group civilizations, they realized if people have this real big sense of vitality in them, they're not going to obey like these bullshit rules of like, to keep down the peasants or whatever it is, or they're not going to like submit to our control. They're going to, because they feel this power within themselves to do things. And essentially all you have is energy. If you have so much energy to do things, even if something is very scary or there's a threat of danger or death, you have confidence to face that because you have that energy and you see its wisdom, how it flows through you. It's even beyond you. You're channeling something. So that sort of confidence that comes with that, and that, like I said, it is your ability to establish yourself as an individual, that you don't depend on anybody else to feel that sense that you exist. Even if you don't, it's not even a confrontational thing. It's just, I'm not doing this anymore. And it's almost like everybody's living horizontally, is what I like to say. It's an exchange on a social level, give and take, and try power struggles. But when your electricity activates in your base and you allow it to flow and you surrender to that inside you, as opposed to surrendering to the horizontal struggles with other personalities, then you become like this. And then there's no power struggle anymore between the horizontal, and it's not possible, And I think also, these are some kind of thoughts that I've had in some moments, but it's like this: like, if you have a bunch of horizontal beings, these are kind of beings that don't know themselves, they don't know their own individuality, independence. To fit in the same space, necessarily one has to be on top of the other, better than the other, worse than the other. We form all these hierarchies. But if you have a bunch of vertical beings, they can all be in the same space. There doesn't need to be any competition because they don't have anything to prove. They know who they are. When you go vertical, you see who you are to the depths of your roots, where you come from this earth, you're part of this earth, but also to the sky, the full expanse of the cosmos. And if you can hold that both, what Satya Ji speaks about a lot is, a more subtle point, is a balance between gravity and grace. And this is something that even a lot of spiritual teachings or movements of the past have not really addressed properly according to him. I will not say, I'm probably not qualified to say so, but it's for a long time spirituality has been like seen as this ascent from the lower to the higher, right? And that's the language that a lot of people, especially a lot of yogis and a lot of people in Indian traditions, it's these processes or kriyas or techniques to move your energies upwards, and there is a sort of desire or an intention to move towards expanding your consciousness. And I think while this is a very necessary movement, because usually people start blocked on those levels and they're only living on the baser levels, it's like, okay, you start to open these up, but why forget about these things? Like, these root parts, the physicality, the sexuality, and all these things, these so-called lower things. Lower in the sense, yes, it's a more low vibration, it's a more kind of gross, dense thing, but doesn't mean that it's less valuable, right? And I think there's been a lot of, the unfortunate thing is that the sort of psychological pattern of rejecting your sexuality or your roots or who you are has leaked into a lot of the spiritualism that has emerged in the past centuries, where it's like, no, that's dirty, that's bad, this whatever, we need to go this way towards God. And what you find in a lot of these people is they do open up these space and do all these things, but sometimes they lack a sort of vitality or energy for life. And this I cannot say. It's not that I've met every being in the world, so I don't know. But
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even the separation of spirituality and material world, like that they are not together, that they're not one, but they are separate. And in the spiritual world, people also, there's a lot of people who say that things like earning money is a bad thing, is an evil thing, or they would say that family relationships, they're not important. You should just focus on yourself. So I think I understand what you're saying with cutting off that lower vibrations, lower chakras. There are so many ways that people refer to it, but it's like cutting off your roots. And if a tree can grow to a certain point, but if you cut the roots, it cannot go further, and at some point it will die. So I think that's what comes to my mind.
It's very true. The analogy of a tree, I think, is a really beautiful analogy for human beings. It's so beautiful in so many ways. But yeah, it's the tallest trees have the deepest roots also, Is that what you said? But yeah, I think the time is coming in the world where I think in many ways the death of people who have certain ideas in the past really opens up space to approach things in a fresh way. And you see this not just in, for example, spirituality, but also in science. There's a very famous quote that like science doesn't advance in like through inventions in the laboratory. It advances by like epitaphs and tombstones. So it's like when the old scientists who have all the kind of clout and the say of the idea space, when they die, then there's a space opens up that people are willing to listen to something new. And this is a huge emphasis of Satya Ji's teaching, is the new, that wisdom is new. Wisdom is always fresh. People think of wisdom, ancient wisdom, old texts and all this stuff. But the reason they're valuable today is they're addressing the live present cosmos, which is now. And that it's like a portal to the now. But that kind of, I think that kind of creative approach, like to even take, in a sense, that creative license to approach even life or spirituality in your own way, I think there comes a point in some people's journeys, at least, where that becomes something that they want to do. And I think systems and structures and practices and everything are very necessary to like lay the groundwork, to build discipline, to open up awareness so that you can start to even feel what's going on in your system. But after a certain point, when you or become more in tune with your system itself has its own unique design that may not look like anything that you or your gurus or other people you respect might say that it should, or how they might look like. I don't know if
Yeah.
you resonate
I can
feelings.
relate because that's the point where I encountered Satya, which was a point where after a year of being married, and I never intended to get married. I always thought it's only me, myself, and my sadhana. And I also thought about leaving my family and just living at the ashram. Who cares? And somehow I would. That's how I see it. Sadhguru brought my wife into my life, and it took me quite some time, but after a year of spending time with her and slowly opening myself up to this fire, opening up myself to the heart also, which that connection between the fire that you were talking about, and then that heart center, and really feeling these emotions that previously I didn't pay attention to. I didn't want to deal with them. So I even had phases where I did more practices just to not have to bother these emotions, because
Mm,
the practices were somehow allowing me to focus on my intellect, my mind, because
mm,
I could focus on certain breathing patterns or certain postures. So I was doing more practices, but in to avoid these emotions. And so after spending a year with my wife, it was like I can't ignore it anymore. And that's that's when Satya came to me, and it was at a point where I was questioning myself. Am I just making things up? Um, I kind of not feel inclined to do my sadhana anymore, but somewhere I feel
mm,
bad. Am
mm,
I a failure? Did I waste Sadhguru's life? Will I go down the path and become a compulsive creature? Like I had a lot of bad thoughts about how are going to end up, and luckily my wife was there saying, "It's okay, don't worry about it. If you want, you can drop them. If you don't want, you can keep the practices. Don't worry about it. But make sure. I mean, I will make sure that I'm there for you, and I will accept you the way that you are, and I will accept you whatever you choose. I'm there with you." And there were many days when I was, crying, sobbing, and just feeling like I failed. I'm a failure. I'm not doing any practices. I'm the worst. And then Satya came into my life, and he was like talking about the Shakti, that energy, that you cannot say yes to one thing and no to another.
Shakti is easiest to experience, and yet we don't experience it. On the physical level, we are struggling between bitter and sweet, pleasant sensation and unpleasant sensation. And that's what our basic conflict in life is with Shakti, that we want some of it and some of it we don't want. And that pisses her off. How dare you? You choose something out of me and reject rest of it. So that is the sadhana aspect. And the highest aspect of Shakti is, for you, every experience, it's just all Shakti. So you don't make any choice, you live every experience as the appearance of Shakti in life. Even your confusion and doubt in the mind, you also see it with reverence as Shakti, showing her form to you. So you see, that needs a guts and devotion, because we have very much of inclination to run away from the bad experience. And our whole suffering is trying to run away from a bad experience. Otherwise, in itself, we suffer 10% and 90% is our psychological resistance. And that's where we deplete ourselves. Whereas if you know how to engage with suffering, you will realize it's the greatest experience of focus. Because when you're suffering, your mind is not distracted. You're left with only that situation, and that's why you're suffering. You want to be frivolous and everywhere, but it won't allow you. It is just there, vibrating in front of you. And that's why in bhakti, people say that Prabhu, God, give me more suffering. Because in suffering, you get focused, you get concentrated. And in that, it's very easy to experience life because your mind is not getting anymore its little entertainment. Most of the people are experiencing only 90% of their thoughts, what we call life. 10% you actually live. The point you keep missing in your life is that not that some divinity out there, this who you are. When you are going to acknowledge that I don't need to look for it, as it is, I am into that.
And it really helped me to accept that I am a human being. I have faults. I'm not a perfect uh, whatever. I don't even can say if there is a perfect person on this planet, but he came to at that point in time, and he really helped me to accept these lower energies, bad. Again, bad. We have labeled it as bad, but negative emotions, and then with his approach, with that acceptance that I started to implement, then I was able to transcend or alchemize these emotions into movement, and I started moving in different ways, using my body to kind of just align myself in with these emotions, and it helped me a lot. So it's coming together. Yeah.
Amazing. That's a very beautiful story. And I think it's very beautiful that your wife was there to support you in that time as a true friend. And I think it's also very beautiful that you had the courage also to leave behind something that, there's a lot of guilt attached to that, to leaving that. I really relate to that part as well because when I met Satya Ji, I had just come from the ashram. I was doing like, a lot of practices every day, and I was really on this sort of path. And then here was this guy who was saying something that it was not in contradiction, but it was different, and it was a different sort of rhythm to it. And I think it took me a while to get more. The more I started trying sort of his practices, the ones Satyaji was saying, and that slowly the Isha practices started dropping out, and then came a point where it wasn't there anymore at all. And I remember I told him about this. I said, I feel a bit guilty or whatever. He said, it's fine. You don't have to drop it. Like you can keep doing it. Just add these also. These things work in conjunction. But inside myself, I just didn't feel the more I was connecting to my intuition was just not really attracting me or moving me in that direction. And I think that thing of guilt is largely just in our own minds. I at least what I like to think, I don't know what's inside his head, but the the grace and the love that Sadhguru has in his work, if people are empowered by what he shares, which I definitely think those practices laid a foundation for me to be able to even appreciate or engage with Satyaji's practices or even just Shakti in general. Like that was the foundational step. But if you take the foundational step and then you branch off in a different direction, I don't think Sadhguru or any guru that is really working for life would have a problem with that, as long as it is guided from the wisdom and the Shakti and sincerity and devotion itself. And it's not, you can off branch it to like out of an ego reason to like glorify yourself or start a school, or many people do this with spirituality to promote themselves and very ambitious in that sense. But if it branches off naturally because that's where your design is going, that's just life's work. Like life doesn't repeat things, systems, structures, and everything. These are human tools to help to engage with life better. But at a certain point, anything structured or mechanical or logical, it has to yield to the organic spontaneity of life. Otherwise, it's going to create decay and stagnation.
I think what you were talking about comes back to that recent video that you uploaded about self-bashing, where we tend to repeat the behavior of our parents and our teachers who through our life had certain expectations of us, and we were not able to fulfill them because our design is different than their design. and we wanted our individuality wanted to find expression, but their individuality was not able to allow us to do that. And so, but like, we evolved and we got older, we have our own lives, our own families, and somewhere there's still that pattern of that bashing of feeling guilty, of feeling bad for making certain decisions. So yeah, it was difficult. I mean, there were, it was like I'll do my practices, and then somewhere I'm like, I'm just doing it like a robot. Like it's like a mechanically forcing me. I have to do it. If I don't do it, I am, I'm wasting Sadhguru's life. He put all this energy into these practices, and I'm not using it. What am I doing? So somewhere I questions my own intuition, and I think in spirituality actually that there are a lot of people who don't even believe in that we have the capability to make our own decisions, to choose the right thing for ourselves, to choose the right practices for ourselves. Somewhere it's always like, you don't know, you're not a master, you're not a guru, so how can you know what's the right thing to do? It's better to listen to the master or the guru.
I think with these kind of people who have this sort of perspective, in their mind, there's clearly a disparity, that the guru is up here and they're down here. And I think I think one of the things might be they see another disciple that is doing something that in their perception is moving like this, and they don't like this disparity. So it's like, be at this level of autonomy or responsibility and don't come up here. And this sort of I think this issue of power dynamics and hierarchy in spiritual spaces is a very controversial and important thing to talk about, because I think there's a lot of fake gurus, but also a lot of maybe well-intentioned people that have something to share, but they're still they still have this hierarchical conditioning, and they impose this sort of thing on their students. And I think this happens a lot in sort of smaller groups around. But I think another thing that struck me about what you said, when you felt you were going through it mechanically and that you should do it, or the sense that I don't know, I don't trust myself, so I trust this other source. I think that this is almost like the steps of the dance to start the dance of spiritual awakening, which is, first step is you realize you have no idea what's going on. And what your mind is telling you to do is you can't really trust it, because it's based on all these conditionings. It's just going to put you in the same situations again and again. So to jump out of that, to move away from that and make the shift from mind to energy, I think for most people, help is needed from somebody else who has already made that shift. And that is the entrance of a guru or a friend or whatever you want to call. It's an intervention. And you rely sort of on the other person's wisdom and their energy for a period, because that's sort of by empathize. Essentially, I think when you spend time with a guru or listen even to a talk, what people like about it, they don't realize they're empathizing with the guru. They're resonating and starting to feel and see things from that person's perspective. So that helps to pull that consciousness out of the thoughts into that pure energy space where the guru is sitting. But once that starts to become established, and I don't think it is complete when it starts to happen, but you start to see that this energy that before you weren't able to feel because you were always predetermining it and controlling it, you didn't allow it any space to breathe. Now you allow it some space to breathe. You see it starts to have a sort of movement and a dance of its own. And then I think the natural inclination comes, okay, let's follow this and where this goes, see where this goes. And I think so both things are true. Like when that person says, "Do you don't know anything, don't trust yourself, listen to the guru." If you're at that mind level, if you're at that kind of very unperceptive level, the lesser evil is that you listen to somebody else who is more attuned than you. But when you start to become attuned, then the lesser evil is that you start to listen to yourself. And evil, I don't, it's a very charged word, but I just mean that something that's not aligned with the flow of life. And I think it can be a thing where, especially somebody, for example, like Sadhguru, who he even says it himself, what he says and communicates to the masses is like not even 10% of what he has to say, really. Like, because he cannot speak to so many people on that deeper level. So I think as people start to go deeper, for some people, it is deeper and deeper into the sort of path or kind of thing that he's laid out, and that's fine. But some people, I think, might feel natural inclination to branch off, and I think that's also fine. Yeah. I hope I don't get destroyed in the comments.
Yeah, there is a certain understanding between, I would say, people who have been on the path with Sadhguru for a quite like a longer period of time. There is a certain understanding that whatever works for you, that's what you keep doing. What doesn't work, discard it. And even Sadhguru says it. You know, the words that he says, don't take it literal, because what if he's answering somebody's question, then he's answering it catering to that person, and it might not cater to you. And so that's, you know, there's like sometimes he says things like against milk.
The takeaway dairy, asthma is gone. For a large number of people, at least 50% of their problem is in the dairy produce.
Sometimes he says things that are good milk.
Today, colon cancer, intestinal cancer are becoming so big, the incidence would be much lower if there is a certain amount of consumption of ghee. And the ghee must be of the right quality. At the same time, if you eat ghee and carbohydrates together, if you ghee and sugar together, then it adds as fat. But if you eat just ghee or just with a small morsel of food that you eat ghee in the beginning, then it works more as a lubricant in the alimentary canal.
To get caught up in that, what is right and what is wrong, I think that's the main thing, that we get so identified with what he says, and then we get trapped in his words. But I think he is always interested in our own evolution, and if we are continuing to evolve, even if that means dropping the practices, and but you're finding ways that we can align ourselves in a different way. I feel that he is only interested in our evolving, not in doing this or doing that. But I wanted to go into, because we are kind of going to the traps of spirituality. And I think one thing that you mentioned is like the trap of being very ambitious. And so in today's world, you know, many people have ambitions, even within the realm of spirituality. So it's like we were just kind of touching it, but there are people who are thinking about how important it is to have certain certifications or a career in spirituality, or that spirituality is like the only thing and nothing else matters. So I just wanted to know how that also can become a trap where we neglect everything, like I did, and we only say yes to physical practices.
I think you said it
that.
very beautifully before, when you were saying when Satya Ji entered your life, and he was saying basically you can't say yes to this and no to this. And I think that's really what true spirituality is you say yes to the 360 degrees of life, which is very arduous because it means saying yes to all the things that you don't want to feel, right? All the yucky feelings and, you know, terrible pains and whatever. And I think ambition in general, is my perspective, is that it arises out of an escape. Ambition is to escape a part of yourself that you don't want to accept. This is for me within myself. So maybe a part of yourself that feels vulnerable or feels hurt or feels weak or judged or inferior, something within you that is unhappy, it's not at rest. It's not, and you're not willing to embrace that part of yourself and accept that pushes you in a direction to achieve something in your mind that you think will compensate for that or get rid of that feeling of inadequacy or whatever it is. So ambition, when we look at ambition like that, it's just an ego trip, you know. But I think, and that is always going to get in the way of your spiritual growth, whether you do something with your time and energy and body that is so-called spiritual, or whether you do something that is not so-called spiritual. That ambitiousness, it eats you up inside. It depletes a lot of energy. For me, the way it manifests for me is a lot of thoughts about the future, envisioning this, and then because I'm invested in making that future reality, then also anxious thoughts come in of like, what if this happens and this happens and all these bad things could happen? And so that fear and that greed are just like two sides of the coin that keep flipping. And what I feel actually most successful people, whether it's materially or spiritually, or let's say somebody who runs a business that is like, I don't know, selling metal or something very like doesn't see spiritual at all. The people who are most successful are people who take their energy, their drive, and their desire, which is a natural thing, but they put it immediately into the present, into action, you know, because essentially we're not psychological beings at all. We are just energy, not even going to say mechanisms, but some energy being kind of organism. And that desire, Satya Ji often says, desire is for creativity. Desire is to create something, is to move something, and all of life is moving based on that desire. But how we know desire as psychological beings is when we're trapped in the psychology, the desire becomes for something, some image in the future. Let's make that a reality. And then what becomes valuable is the image and not the reality that you're in anymore. And it's that channeling of that desiring energy into the mind and into projections. That's where all the trouble starts, because I think for two reasons. One is that you don't really have much control over these projections, even though you feel you have control, is just defined by your past and like various conditionings and whatever. But also, more importantly, is that you are no longer engaging in a dialogue with life, because living is about giving and receiving energy. And you see that in your breath. You inhale, you receive energy, you exhale, you give back energy. And everything is like this. And so when you put your attention to the present moment, you are like the energy that life has given you, you're giving it back to life, because life is only now. These thoughts in your head are like a side, almost like you're trying to overwrite life with this kind of side construction. And what I've experienced is when you're able to relax and give back, then it reflects back even more. And then you give back even more and you reflect back even more. And as you become more attuned into present action, or even just being and sitting and just being with this, that circulation starts. And it's like, this is their dialogue with life of appreciation and love, because it reflects back anything. So if you start off with a gratitude or appreciation for whatever it is, even just being, actually the best thing is for just being, then this kind of starts, you suddenly find you have a lot more energy to do anything. And then, but it's not, there's an asterisk here, which is not do anything now. Oh, now I have built up some energy. Let me go away and do my mind fantasies, whatever I was thinking about before. And that's where I think a lot of practitioners, myself included, you build up the energy in meditation, because during the sadhana, you're basically fully focusing on something that brings you into the present, that circulation starts. But then you go out into life and then something happens, makes you uncomfortable or scares you or stresses you. And then it's just the mind, and all that energy leaked. And then you're suddenly like, oh my God. Yeah. So
So how do we in those situations when we are outside in life, how do we, because we don't want to control the mind, right?
yeah.
So how do we, it's to keep that that, so if we are aware of that flow, that the energy is always flowing, and that there will be moments of anger, there will be moments of rage, there will be moments of fear, um, but how do we not, waste our energy in going in that direction?
I think in a real practical way, the first step for most people is to start with feeling flow, because I think many people don't have a real experiential understanding of flow. Arguably, nobody ever actually does, because whenever you think to understand flow, you're not in the flow anymore, right, of things. But
Mm-hmm.
for that, catharsis, I think, is really needed for a lot of people. That what you were saying, for example, there's a lot of unpleasant feelings that you just don't know how to address. So there are certain methods, again, it's available on our website. So like the shaking dancing meditation, gibberish meditation, like even writing things first in the morning, just expressing a lot of this stuff out, it starts to clear that space, and then your energy can start to flow and take new forms. Otherwise, it's just constrained into the patterns of whatever is locked in there. Once that starts to flow, it's really about learning totality of action, which any sadhana really kind of teaches you, but especially aggressive physical embodied things like shaking or dancing, or it teaches you how to, with total involvement, just do whatever it is that you're doing now. This skill is essentially the whole thing. If you can, once you can maintain total involvement in whatever you're doing now without having any sort of resistance or thought or any sort of, without flowing your energy into any different direction, you're not scattered anymore, then you're just an integrated energy that keeps moving with life. And that's the challenging part, because the mind always comes in and cuts in, and we are identified with the mind, which is why we get caught into that and start to believe it. So I think once you have that flow of energy, vital energy, and you do things with intensity, whether it's chanting is a great way, shaking, dancing, any of these things, then you have also to develop the awareness part of it. So it's like Shakti and Shiva. Shakti is the energy, that which you perceive, and Shiva is the awareness, the one who is aware. So you can then start to naturally, you don't even have to try, naturally that awareness starts to appear and sink in, and you move more into a space of witnessing while you're totally engaged in whatever action you're doing. Let's say you're shaking very furiously, but you realize also something within you is still and is aware of the shaking. And I'll tell you, when those moments where your ego kind of drifts away and it's just Shakti and Shiva, there's like an explosion of energy as well. And you really realize that this small thing that's creating nuisance is actually like an interrupter between two wires that are like 1,000,000 volts. And basically this is the essence of, I think, Satya Ji's approach, which is on a pragmatic level. A lot of spiritual teachings are just about awareness, just watch the thoughts, just watch the breath, or even pure, like, Ramana Maharshi, just who am I, just inquiry. And what he says is very interesting, which is that maybe in the past, these methods worked for more people because people were already physically flowing in their lives. They were doing work in the fields, or just even daily life was much more physically active. And they didn't have so much time to sit and brood and think. They didn't have the internet that was sending them in constantly messages.
Yeah.
So the mind was a lot simpler. So you could just start to observe. But nowadays, if you sit to observe, and I'll say this honestly, like if I just sit to meditate, even now a lot of the times, just thoughts and just getting very easily wrapped up into stories. So, but if you take that energy and you put it into action, you engage your hands into something, whether that's like the art meditation that Satya Ji teaches, or chanting to make the sound, or anything rooted in action. Action is only in the present. Your energy gets engaged with that. It's easier to be then in the present. Then you observe. And the subtle problem with observation-based techniques, that they just tell you, here's the pointer, observe. What that ends up doing most of the time is you start to make it, oh, this is an action I have to do. I need to observe. You just think about observing, you think about awareness instead of actually being aware. One maybe elegant way that Satya Ji summarizes this is they used to say that in a lot of old Indian traditions that you just focus on Shakti, and wherever Shakti is, Shiva follows like a shadow.
Yeah, the one thing that came to me when you were talking about accepting the current reality the way as it is, instead of going too much into the future and trying to have certain ideas about the outcomes, which also is in alignment with being involved with whatever you're doing with 100% without thinking about the outcome, without thinking about what you're getting out of it, is that you will always have what you need, but what you need is not always what you want. And so I think that's like a certain acceptance that we have to have, even though if you have a desire, like a desire in that sense is not a bad thing unless you are very attached to it, because you can use a desire to generate energy, and that energy can then be used to generate certain emotions which are pleasant, because if you have a certain vision which is pleasant, you can generate emotions that are pleasant, and so you can then navigate your life in a pleasant way. But if you get attached to that desire outcome and then things don't happen the way you want them to, then it becomes a mess.
And I think it's sort of levels or a gradient of things where if you're somebody like me who is just an overthinking, daydreaming person from childhood, then having desires and visions, it very quickly becomes like an unhealthy energy leaching things. Then, but what I've recently been feeling more is and what I've observed in other people is who are more action oriented. When they have a desire, I feel it doesn't eat them up inside. It can it creates a smooth flow of energy in the way that you described, that you have a pleasant vision, sort of pleasant sensations. And of course there's ups and downs, but they hold on to that kind of principle and they move in that direction. And I think this works to an extent, and in a way this is kind of necessary part of the thing. But what I feel subtly, and again, this is not something I'm so sure about, but I think that to really, once Shakti has made a visit in your life, I mean, she's always there, but once you acknowledge that she's there and you have that reunion and you feel, even just for a few seconds, that presence, nothing else, no vision that you achieve or accomplish will give you that. That is, I think, that only becomes available when that desiring creative energy, you realize it's not your energy even to do what you want with, it's her. It is her in you. And you just let her speak and you let her breathe and let her flow. And that in that moment, it's not an achievement of anything. It's just a connection, a relation, like when you're with your beloved, or, it's like that. And I think maintaining that throughout life, then projects and, various things in life on a more practical level, they come about. I don't even know, this is personally me, I don't even know if it's necessary at all to have a plan or a vision. I actually because for me, I'm not able to do that without immediately stressing myself. So, but instead, if I make it my sort of intention to just try and be with this and to just be on my sadhana, then whatever sort of comes out of that, like sometimes I do work, sometimes I don't work. And it has its own rhythm and its own wisdom, and it's definitely not the one that I would do from the mind if I was trying to move towards a goal. So I don't know, that's personally how I'm living my life. And maybe it's not that there's one mode that works for everybody, but I just can't really see myself having a sort of a vision of a goal and using that as my generator of pleasantness or generator of energy. Because for me, it becomes very quickly more important than the present, you know. And but that's just for me.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or
Yeah.
wrong thing, but it's good to hear your perspective. I have just a few short rapid fire questions for you, but is there anything from your side that I mean, I'll give you just like questions, and you can answer them in a short way, in a sentence or two.
Okay.
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 So the first thing is one thing about Satya Ji that would surprise people.
He's very funny.
All right. And the next one, if you could describe Satya Ji's energy in one word, what would it be?
Powerful.
Powerful. And for closing thoughts, just for listeners who want to join your community or get in touch, what would be the best way for them to join?
So the best way is to visit the website, satyaspeaks.net. There you can find connections to everything. And I really encourage you to take some time to explore the website, especially the sections on human studios and the practices section. Human Studios is an online platform that we are creating. Currently, it exists on Telegram, but we have plans to move it to a different platform. This is the real core space where Satya Ji shares deeper teachings with people. So if you are really drawn and really want to make a commitment to yourself to grow, that's the place to be. And from there, we're also doing deeper programs and deeper courses for the people who feel ready and drawn to it. On social media, there's the YouTube channel where we regularly put up clips or even long talks by Satya Ji that go quite into depth. And there's the Instagram page as well. Both are called Satya Speaks. So that's SATYA SPEAKS, but you probably write it down somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, that's no. Maybe for those who are just listening and they can connect through that. That's wonderful. Any closing thoughts? Anything from your side that you would like to say before we close?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for holding the space and for having this conversation with me, and also for having this conversation with other beings and allowing these stories to be shared so that they might inspire some people towards themselves.
Wonderful.
Thank you.